For more, I am now joined by South Carolina Congresswoman and gubernatorial candidate Nancy Mace. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me. I want to just have you sort of respond to the news from yesterday, this downed jet in Iran. The president says that it doesn't impact negotiations with Iran. What do you think? Do you think it does?
Well, I trust President Trump on this and the negotiations, and that it will not affect our negotiations with Iran. I also first want to say that I have never been more proud to be an American than yesterday afternoon when we heard, hours after one of the airmen ejected out of that jet, that American forces, special operations forces, went in and successfully found one of our soldiers. And I think that goes to the incredible investment America has made in the greatest fighting force in the world, to show how strong, how fierce, and how smart these guys and gals are, and how successful they have been so far in this endeavor. Very, very proud to see that. And we're praying that the second soldier will be found swiftly. So our prayers are with that soldier and that soldier's family this Easter weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that that is very important to you, has been for a while. I want to put up a new Fox News poll that shows that more Americans are against military action in Iran. Right now, 58% of Americans are against what we are doing in Iran. Some say we need to wrap it up. Trump said 2 to 3 more weeks in his address this week. Does this jet being downed change the calculus for you? Should it change the calculus for us?
I don't think so, but it does illustrate the inherent risks of war, potential escalation. For example, most Americans that I talk to, and as the leading candidate for governor in South Carolina, I'm crossing big towns and small towns all across the state this recess, and no one wants an elongated conflict like Iraq or like Afghanistan, a 20-year never-ending war where we don't have an exit strategy. And I think that's very important to the American people who are watching and who are waiting, who have sons and daughters who are being deployed overseas. And we owe them an answer to the question of, how does this end? As we do with every single conflict. And it's been difficult to watch over the last 70 years. I can't name a single conflict where we've bombed Islam into peace. And so that's why these negotiations are so important right now, to ensure Iran doesn't get nuclear weapons and that we end this in a productive manner.
Okay. I want to move on to something else that you're watching very closely is the former AG now, Pam Bondi, is out of her office. And this is what the Oversight Committee said about what they plan to do in terms of perhaps bringing her to Capitol Hill. They say since Pam Bondi is no longer Attorney General, Chairman Comer will speak with Republican members and the Department of Justice about the status of the deposition subpoena and confer on next steps. You have said that your subpoena stands. Have you talked with Chairman Comer yet about your feelings, and where is he at right now when it comes to that?
I have reached out to him. We have not spoken. We've been playing phone tag over the last 24 hours. But the way that I drafted the subpoena was to bring her by name personally into the Oversight Committee, as opposed to being the Attorney General of the United States. And so legally and constitutionally, the subpoena still stands. I do believe she would still be valuable to the investigation on the Oversight Committee. I've also offered to Chairman Comer that perhaps we could have an Epstein task force for those of us that are most passionate about getting the truth out to the American people, so as not to, detract from other investigations that the Oversight Committee would want to go on. I'm open to that as well. If I can help lead that effort, I would love to. But we have to get to the bottom of this. I was not impressed by some of the comments this week that the DOJ would have no further interest in arresting anyone related to trafficking and the Epstein cases. That was very disappointing to hear. I want women across the country to know that we care and that we will get to the bottom of this.
Well, we have that soundbite, I believe. This is Todd Blanche earlier this week, I think, with Jesse Waters, talking about just that, what he's going to do with the Epstein files. Let's play it here.
Now, the Epstein files, you'd agree, not handled well? No, and I don't, first of all, I have never heard President Trump say that the Attorney General that anything that happened to her had anything to do with the Epstein files. We have made every single congressman, senator available to come and see any document, redacted, unredacted, that they want. And so I think that to the extent that the Epstein files was a part of the past year of this Justice Department, it should not be a part of anything going forward.
So it doesn't seem like anything's going to change from Pam to Todd.
Well, one, the false statement that Todd Blanche stated there is that there are documents that are unredacted. Many of the most important documents that I've sought to view at the Department of Justice are still redacted, particularly the names of co-conspirators. Like, why is that information being hidden from the American public? And so I promise to get to the bottom of it as a survivor, and I want other survivors to know that your voices are heard, that those who are predators should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and whatever I have to do legally to ensure that there is no cover up in this going forward, I will do so in my capacity on the Oversight Committee. And as a leading candidate for governor, I've been to small towns all across the state the last week or so. People have been thanking me, standing up.
This is what they're bringing up to you, the Epstein files.
Yeah, they're bringing it up at
Wow.
in the campaign for governor. They're very proud of the work we've done, subpoenaing Pam Bondi and getting to the bottom of the Epstein files. Conservatives in South Carolina want answers.
Okay, very quickly here, just ahead is the DHS funding fight. It looks like Speaker Johnson is now in line with the Senate plan to fund the department without funding ICE, put that with reconciliation whenever that happens. Are you going to back this? I mean, what changed here?
Well, I think that there will be some resistance unless the reconciliation package is done hand in hand with that appropriations process to pay DHS. The feeling of many House Republicans is frustration with what Senator Thune has done, and they want to make sure that we don't get rolled again on this, and that our folks on the front lines at TSA and our Border Patrol agents, everybody gets paid.
And you know reconciliation takes a very long time. I mean, I believe that
which is
last
why
year
it's
it
really
started
important.
February, didn't end till July.
Yeah, well, that's why it's important. We're talking about a skinny reconciliation package that could come sooner than that. It's very important for our national security, both from the Border Patrol and our airports, that we get this right.
We got to get
do
these
it
people
fast.
paid. Okay, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, thank you very much for joining me on your Saturday.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.